All right. Good morning. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. We're excited today for innovation in auto. When you think about auto, I'm not sure we're all thinking innovation, but boy, do we have a panel for you today to talk about innovation in today's environment. My name's Joe Fuke. I'm the CEO of Reputation. I'm super happy to be here with you today to kick this off. If you think about change in the automotive industry in the last 2 years, it's been nuts, right? COVID. How do we take advantage of some of the situations we're in? There's no secret that dealers and OEMs alike must act on implementing strategies to ensure better future for the brand, dealerships, and ultimately you, the customer experience. So today we have a lot of fun. We're going to use themes from the hit show Ted Lasso to guide the panelists through kind of that whole innovation discussion. As Ted Lasso would say, every day is a great day. I love that show. This session will dive into how dealerships can take on challenges, spark curiosity, build relationships, foster new innovation, and above all, believe in the belief. So a couple of quick things that I'll just point out that the speakers are going to touch on today is, now is the time to gear up a CX program. Listening to your customers right now is key, especially during the supply shortage. Being empathetic and explaining why you're showing empathy is so important. Leading with transparency and honesty is so important today, and we're going to hear from the panel on these topics. They're also going to touch on how the Reputation platform allows users to get a pulse on things from these public listening posts. And of course, actively listening and listening at scale is so important, especially with some of these panelists that will talk today about these massive scales of thousands of dealerships. So with that, we're really happy you're here with us today. I'm going to introduce Melanie Fiedler, who's our Senior Manager of Field Marketing, and she's going to walk us through this presentation. So Melanie, take it away.
Thank you so much, Joe. Like you just said, my name is Melanie Fiedler, and I'll be your moderator today. I've been working in the industry for nearly 7 years now, and I've been on the tech provider side in a number of roles. I've been with Reputation for about 1.5 years, and I'm really happy to be presenting on behalf of Reputation today. So this panel, today we have Chad Jernberg. He's from one of the largest dealer groups in the US. Matt Wilson, he's from an innovative OEM with CX at the forefront of everything they do. And finally, Ron Andrews, an industry influencer who has spent his career on both the retail and technology side of the business. You'll meet them shortly, but right now let's take a look at today's agenda. So we're going through these 3 items. We'll have a quick industry review, looking at a couple slides on how review volume, pricing sentiment, inventory shortages, and reviews have changed over the last 2 years. From there, you'll meet your panelists, and we'll discuss how the industry can take on challenges, spark curiosity, build relationships, foster innovation, and like Joe said, above all, believe in belief. With that, we'll wrap up with a Q&A. So let's get going. Like I said, we will be moving through these fairly quickly, just because our panelists have so much to share, and I don't want to cut them short in any way. So looking at this first slide, review volume decline. The review volume decline has been going down since March 2021. You'll see that right on the slide here. The average star rating is hovering around 4.2, which is fairly the same. But what this is really telling us is that review volume is down because dealers are selling less cars, but for more money. Some of the things we'll talk about today are geared toward how we can get those star ratings to increase. Moving on to the next slide, category mentions. Customer service is currently seeing the highest share of mentions since 2020. Mentions for service and speed have also increased every year. Mentions for sales and staff have increased since 2021, but are still lower than 2020. And you'll also note that pricing mentions are about the same as last year. So speaking of pricing, let's take a look at the trend and the sentiment in regard to that. It's been pretty inconsistent, with the overall sentiment still declining today. When the pandemic hit in 2020, you'll note the spike in pricing as dealers were lifting prices, whereas today, take Ford, for example, they've told dealers you cannot sell vehicles for above MSRP. Moving on to shortages. Our recent auto report showed that reviews mentioning shortages have actually increased 32 times in the last year. The reviews that we've collected show that customers are leaving feedback related to these shortages, as it's directly impacting their customer experience. So let's take a look at review snapshots and what people are saying in live time. Starting off with the positive. Briefly, these positive reviews have focused an appreciation for the staff in the stores who are doing things right. A couple examples are, despite the current truck shortage, the team helped me get the truck I wanted. Due to the shortage, they didn't have the vehicle I wanted. So after some debating, Luke was able to help me pick an Elantra I really love. He was very helpful, informative, and an awesome salesman. And finally, our salesman, Brad, did an amazing job keeping me informed. On the other hand, the negative reviews highlight customers' frustrations with the inventory shortage and the consequent pricing. Here are a few. Asked for an out the door on a vehicle advertised on their website for $47K and received a $65,000 quote. Quote, my favorite, near $5,000 national chip shortage fee. Quote, total crux, marking up trucks $6,000 over MSRP to capitalize on the shortage of inventory. And the last one, due to the shortage, they are $20,000 over sticker price. So where do we go from here? And given that this is, a difficult situation for everyone, and yes, there are certainly some bad actors that are hurting their reputation, and on top of that, providing a terrible customer experience, there are also disruptors entering the space and spending more advertising dollars than ever to steal market share. So now that we've looked at these trends and know how customer sentiment has changed, where do we go from here? If you are a retailer or OEM, how do you take all of this into consideration to craft your CX strategy from the future? What we really want to do is take your customer's experience from this to this. We're about to explore how the industry is adapting and what the future of automotive may look like. So as you heard Jill mention, you've heard me mention a couple times now, Ted Lasso. Why the tie-in? Quickly, we're going to deploy a brief poll. Please chime in. Who has seen the show? Still coming. We'll give it another couple seconds here. Seeing as
way more no's than I thought.
I know. I'm surprised
right, Apple
too.
Plus.
We will. We'll go ahead and play the trailer then, just to get everyone caught up, and help them think, or start to realize like the general theme for this. Then, so let's get that video going. And while Rocio gets it queued up,
Oi mate, there's you.
I believe it is.
Wicked. You coaching football. You are a legend for doing something so stupid. I mean, it's mental. They're gonna murder you.
This is a bit of news from the other side of the Atlantic. AFC Richmond announced the hiring of their new manager, American football coach Ted Lasso.
You're an American who's now in charge of a football club, despite possessing very little knowledge of the game.
Oh! I know that AFC Richmond is going to give you everything they got, win or lose.
Or tie.
Right, y'all do ties here. Did you see that? He must be from England, yeah. Wales. Is that another country?
Yes and no.
How many countries are in this country?
4.
Like it or not, Richmond are changing the way we do things. And from now on, that way is the Lasso way.
Hey, look, this car's got an invisible steering wheel.
What you're doing is irresponsible. This club actually means something to this town.
You don't think I see that every day out there on the streets? Are you kidding me? I think that's what it's all about. Embracing change. Same thing! Being brave.
Your decision to bench Jamie was a masterstroke.
I don't think we're allowed to talk like that at work anymore.
You got no fear of the underdog.
For me, success is not about the wins and losses. It's about helping these young fellas be the best versions of themselves on and off the field. I always figured that tea was just going to taste like hot brown water. And you know what? I was right. Yeah, it's horrible. No, thank you.
Welcome to England.
Awesome. So based on what you might have been able to pick up from that trailer, this isn't a soccer show. It's about a show with life as soccer, or with life with soccer as the backdrop. It's a show for our times. It's about changing the game with yourself, at work, and personal relationships. It's a show about leadership, understanding people, curiosity, and belief. So without further ado, let's meet our panelists. Chad is the Vice President of Customer Experience at Home and Automotive. Matt is the Director of Customer Experience and Training at Infinity. And Ron Andrews is Senior Director, Enterprise Strategy at Cars.com. Let's kick off this panel, you guys. So for these first two questions, you must answer with one of the choices I give you. The possible answers are a lot, a little, or not at all. How much do you agree with this sentence? Leaders don't need to be or claim to be the experts. Matt, we'll start with you.
A lot.
Chad?
A lot.
Ron?
A lot.
Okay. Again, you can only answer with one of those three choices. How much have customer expectations changed since the pandemic? Matt, we'll start with you again.
I'm going to go with a lot again.
Chad?
I'm going with a little.
Okay. Ron?
I'm going to say not at all.
Okay. So the two-round answer the two-word answer round has officially ended. But Ron, can you please expand on your answer of not at all?
Well, I say that hopefully to raise a few eyebrows. But if you think about it, like consumer expectations for how they shop for and purchase anything has changed dramatically over the last few decades. And really, like that happened prior to the pandemic. I think for all of us, when we think about a modern shopping or buying experience, it's all about two key things. It's convenience and speed, maybe three with transparency built in there. Car shoppers, I think, have expected something better for a long time. I think as an industry, we've just never been able to live up to that. And the pandemic simply forced that change to happen.
Thank you. So in Ted Lasso, we quickly learned that he doesn't know the game and he doesn't have support from the team or the community. Negative feedback comes at Ted from everywhere. Yet we see Ted demonstrating how a rising tide lifts all boats and how clarity, consistency, and caring leadership changes the game. Here at Reputation, we're seeing more customer feedback mentioning inventory than ever before. The chip crisis and inventory shortage is impacting both dealers and customers. For example, in our latest auto report, nearly half the people surveyed confirm they will read at least 5 reviews prior to selecting a dealership. Chad, we'll start with you. How has the inventory shortage affected dealers' CX strategy or the type of feedback or reviews they receive? Further, will you explain how the Reputation platform has really helped you navigate that?
Sure. So I wouldn't say that it's really impacted our strategy. Our strategy has always been to be easy to do business with and transparent. What's changed is how we need to execute and deliver transparency and ease of doing business. A lot of new things have come before us that we weren't facing before. In the past, we would sell whatever vehicle was on the ground and push for that. Now we have scenarios where there's a significant back order to get a car. We have to be upfront about what that entails. We have to be more empathetic with the fact that the pricing model has changed because of that, and help customers understand better why that is, and enable them through education and through empathy to get exactly what it is that they're looking for. There's similar challenges that we're facing with just the overall display of inventory on our websites, where there could be in-transit vehicles showing that make it look like we're trying to bait and switch a customer in. A lot of that is the education factor, things that we're still trying to, I believe, overcome as an industry. But it's really more being nimble on our toes to make sure that whatever we are putting forward to the customer is transparent, that we're not trying to create a false reality, and that we're guiding them and holding their hand through that journey. As far as how we use the Reputation tool to get in closer with that, we have a steady stream of feedback that can come in from both buyers and non-buyers. We use the survey platform as well as the reviews platform, and it gives us an instant pulse on how we're positioning pricing, how we're positioning the shortage. Depending on how that salesperson is explaining that story to the customer, has a significant impact on their impression of us, and they're not going to be afraid to be vocal about that. Having the tool gives us much quicker visibility to be able to adjust course, give the proper talk tracks and the proper training to the salespeople who might not be delivering that story with the full amount of empathy.
Thank you, Chad. So piggybacking on, the first part of the question on transparency, this next question will be for all of you, but starting specifically with Matt. How has the industry changed their marketing strategies to be more proactive and better set expectations with customers?
I think we all understand that the power for the customer has never been greater. They've got much more access to information, and they rely on peer reviews to make their determinations on both products, services, but also the retailers that provide them. So for us, we need to tap into that, as a luxury brand, and proudly I can say we're one of the best customer experience automotive brands in the industry. That's a position of strength for us that we need to be able to lean into and leverage those third-party reviews and those peer reviews as a strength, and leverage that in our marketing.
Thank you. What about you, Ron?
I think one of the things that we consistently are seeing is dealers are moving away from some of the more traditional advertising messaging that they've used for the last couple decades, which was pretty much focused on price and payment, right? Like we've all seen commercials on TV or, heard them on the radio where the dealer is just kind of yelling about like what the best deal is or what the current lease offer is, or, push, pull, drag your trade in, right? We'll give you more money. And now we're starting to focus more on the customer experience and really leaning into how are we going to make things easy? How are we going to make it a more transparent process? And how are we going to compete ultimately with some of the things that customers are seeing coming from like the Carvanas of the world, which are simply saying, hey, you don't have to leave your house, right? Like you can do everything 100% online. You can do it all from the comfort of your own home. And it's going to be very quick and transparent. So dealers are starting to shift, and I think it's starting to modernize and help them create what I like to call a brand promise that goes beyond just, hey, here's the best deal, but really like, how can we build trust and hopefully help you be a customer of ours for a lifetime?
Thank you, Ron. And Chad, we'll finish with you here.
Sure. For us, it's become less of a numbers game and more of a quality over quantity when you consider the leads that are coming in. So we're a lot more strategic in our targeting of who we draw in alignment to both the inventory that we have available, the inventory that they may own that we want to acquire, and then also putting our best foot forward so that when a customer does contact us through any channel, we're taking full advantage of that opportunity. So rather than increasing our spend significantly to get more people in, we're doing more and converting at a higher rate with those who are coming in and delivering them with a more personalized journey from marketing all the way end to end through the experience.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next question. Given the market conditions, vehicle prices have skyrocketed. Used cars cost more than ever. New cars no longer have discounts or incentives. And in some cases, you see these being marked up above MSRP. In the show, we see paying attention to the details and understanding what is important to people as a recurring theme. So tying this into the dealership experience, our latest auto report found that over 60% of people will travel more than 20 miles to visit a top-rated dealership. Consumers want a great dealership experience. So what are the best and worst examples you've seen from dealers managing customer experience during this unique time period? Ron, we'll start with you on this one.
I'll share some insights from not only the cars.com marketplace, but also, some of the actual tier 3 dealer websites that we host across the country. We host about 6,000 of them. And, I think every dealer website has a chat or messaging solution on it in some capacity. And that's something that we track. So at the beginning of the pandemic in April of 2020, we saw that chats and text messages coming through our web platforms actually doubled. And what's interesting is that number has not gone down. It's actually stayed very consistent all the way up to even today. And I think, as we think about a modern consumer experience, a modern car buying experience, I like to think that it starts with a modern communication strategy. So some of the best examples that I can give are the dealers that are leaning in and actually utilizing those messaging and chat solutions to connect with their customers in more meaningful ways. In a lot of cases, dealers typically outsource that to like a third-party call center. And that call center really can't answer the customer's questions. They really can't build a relationship, and they really don't add a lot of value. They typically just say, hey, what's your name, email, phone number? Someone's going to get back to you as soon as they can. And I think naturally as a customer, then you leave that website and you go find somebody else, hopefully, that can provide you with a great experience and answer your questions. So seeing dealers now really lean in and really take action on those platforms and start to really leverage those technology solutions to their full capacity has been awesome. And the dealers that are doing a really great job of it are seeing some really good results. They're seeing more leads coming through. They're seeing a higher closing rate on those leads. And it turns out that those deals that come from those leads are actually much more profitable. And there's some other things as well. I think, dealers are doing a better job merchandising their vehicles, showing, what vehicles are in transit, what is, in some cases even sold. Like we have dealers showing like sold inventory. And then also allowing customers to actually like build and price a vehicle directly from the website so that a dealer can, explore dealer trades or, a special order or whatever it may be. These are all very new things and things that typically dealers didn't offer in the past. And I think what it's doing is it's really helping them push forward to create that modern customer experience.
Thank you. Matt, what about you? What are some of the best and worst examples you've seen?
The best examples are retailers that are leveraging transparency and honesty. Customers understand that we're in a chip shortage and an inventory shortage, and retailers have fewer vehicles to sell and therefore need to maximize their profit opportunity. And as long as we're honest with those conversations with the customer, and they're not coming in on one vehicle expecting it to be there and having it sold out from under them, or being told one price and come in and then they add a market surcharge that they didn't communicate when they had the opportunity to. That's where we start to get into issues when we start breaking the trust of our customers. That and leveraging the technology to be easier to do business with. And Chad said it for Holman. It's our mantra at Infinity to be the easiest premium car company to do business with. And that starts with leveraging the digital tools to enable that for the consumer. Do business with the customer the way the customer wants to do business with you. Don't force them into your funnel. You're part of their purchase experience. They're not part of your funnel.
Fantastic. So here at Reputation, we found that price is the top driver of negative ratings, with over 80% of customers saying price is the number one factor when buying a car. So Chad, how do you balance the focus on customer experience against profitability?
So this ties into one of the key themes in Ted Lasso, which is believe in belief. You have to believe that if you treat the customer right on that transaction, even in a market where you could be potentially adding a significant markup on a car because there are fewer of them around, you have to think what that long game effect is going to be on that customer's relationship with you. You've got to think beyond the one transaction and look at it as more of a lifetime value proposition for the customer. Because if you can get that customer through and they feel that they've paid a fair price, again, there's empathy, there's the properly explaining the story, the current situation, but also not gouging. There is a fine balance to walk there, and if you can make the customer feel good on the outside of that, on the backside of that transaction, now they have a bit more confidence and trust that they're going to come back into your service department and feel that they'll be treated well. It's a similar thing on the service side. If you treat that customer with respect, with empathy, explain things to them clearly, and they feel they can trust you, when you call them with that recommendation of work, they're far more likely to believe that that work is necessary and be willing to pay you for it because you're a trusted advisor to them, not just someone trying to oversell you on goods or services that you don't need. It's always having that, the customer at heart, the long view. It's not just one transaction. It's a series. It's a lifetime value target that you're going after. And instilling that in the teams who are delivering the service as well is critically important. If they don't believe it, they're not going to execute against it the same way, and they won't seek to build that trust or be on the customer's side throughout the transaction.
Matt, do you want to weigh in on that one too?
Yeah, I would say that I agree with Chad. These two are not mutually exclusive, right? So generally the happiest customers, the ones that are going to be your biggest brand advocates, are usually your more profitable customers. But it all starts and ends with trust and delivering that customer not only the experience, but the services that will make them come back, and not trying to get it all in one shot. If you have a customer in for service, it's doing the MPI and doing a real MPI, red, yellow, green, right? Setting expectations that, hey, here's everything that's good about your car. Here are the things that we don't need to address today, but in 6 months, it's probably going to come up. And here are the 2 or 3 red items that need to get serviced. And here's why, right? And if you can provide visual evidence to that, even better with video or pictures, even better. But it's establishing that trust and establishing that they're a valued customer for the long term, not just I've got you today and I'm going to try and maximize my profit opportunity with today because I don't know if I'll ever see you again. If that's your attitude, you won't.
Thank you both. So one of the challenges with the franchise dealer model is that every store is operated and managed differently than the next. And the disruptors in the space like Tesla and Carvana skip the dealership model altogether, which in turn removes the human element, but this can be, positive or negative depending on the circumstances. We opened up our panel discussing leaders don't need to be or claim to be the experts. For instance, Ted Lasso openly admits in a press conference, heck, you could fill 2 internets with what I don't know about football. With that comes vulnerability, but also being open to learning. So how have the responsibilities of dealership managers and leaders changed? Ron, I caught one of your NADA presentations about 2 months ago at this point, and you talked on creating a modern retailing experience. And you said there were 3 things, and you used an analogy of a 3-legged stool. Can you tell us some more?
Yeah, so I talked about these 3 things that at a dealership really need to be in balance to create a modern customer experience. And the 3 things were marketing, operations, and this thing that nobody really talks about in this industry a whole lot, which is culture. And culture is really important because I think ultimately, like for everything that we're talking about pulling off today and helping the industry drive forward into the future, the culture at a store is going to be absolutely crucial. And when we think about the responsibilities of a manager versus a leader, that's a really clear delineation that I just want to make sure like everybody understands. Like a manager and a leader can be 2 very different things. And I think dealers ultimately need to be thinking about how they are creating better leaders at their stores and not just great managers. You probably have people at your stores that are great at managing P&L, that are great at managing the numbers, managing inventory, structuring deals, all those kind of things. And you need good managers, don't get me wrong, but you also need leaders that are really looking at how you can maximize the investment that your team has in the company and that you're giving back to your employees as well. And also helping to define like, what is your North Star, right? Like, what are the things that we're all coming to work and working together every day to accomplish? It's not just to sell and service more cars. It's not just to make more money. Ultimately, like you need to have that vision. I think the best leaders are visionaries. And what we're talking about driving the industry forward requires everybody to be bought in on the mission of how we're going to get there. And you really need to lean in and work with your team to better understand how all of those individuals are unique, where they maybe need help, maybe they need assistance in certain areas. What are the things that they want to learn? What are the unique skills that they have that you can help them maximize in their day-to-day? All of those things ultimately create the culture of any business. And for any business to succeed or to adapt and go through massive change, which is what the industry right now is going through, it requires a really strong culture.
Thank you, Ron. Matt, how have the responsibilities of dealership managers and leaders changed?
Well, to me, there's a really good tie into Ted Lasso here as well. So one of the themes and one of the sayings out of that show is be curious, not judgmental, right? So there's plenty of people in this industry that are in departments that have a level of subject matter expertise, but you can't and won't ever know everything. So allowing the people that work for you or work with you the freedom to bring up new ideas and to investigate those and don't dismiss them, but also to be curious and not judgmental about the other departments within the store. There tends to be and continues to be kind of a siloed mentality in retail where the back end of the shop and the front end of the shop are kind of very separate. But ultimately, it's one holistic experience for the consumer. They look at your dealership as their dealership, not as my dealership's service department, my dealership's parts department, my dealership's used car department, my dealership's new car department. So working together and working together as one team, you would be surprised. A technician might have a phenomenal idea for how we might be able to market and sell used cars. A used car sales consultant might have an idea of how we could be more efficient, checking customers in the lane. But having that open dialogue and making it an environment for sharing that can foster new and creative ideas is essential.
Thank you. So we've talked a lot about how we can use customer feedback to get better in operational projects and marketing processes, but what about employees? How do we get better at gathering employee feedback? Chad, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Sure, and it's a lot of what Matt just touched on. There's a there's a complete tie between your employee experience and your customer experience. And if your employees aren't happy with how they're being treated, they're not going to treat the customers in a real positive way either. There's also a real tie between what's happening in the reality of your customer experience and whether all of that is making its way in through either your surveys or your other inputs. These are things that lie as ideas in your employees' heads and minds, and they are such an untapped resource. But there needs to be that tree of trust or that safety net to not feel like you're in a vulnerable position if you bring up an idea that may be outside of your scope of responsibility. It's to remain innovative and to encourage that entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship, I've heard it called, sourcing those ideas from your employees, letting them feel safe to explain when either a customer has left and seemed unhappy with the experience they had, or if they're seeing a repeated pattern occurring, that's something that you as a leader or a manager can hit off at the pass. They are a highly valuable source of information. They just need to be asked and feel comfortable enough to give you the answers.
Thank you, Chad. I'm going to have you answer one more question here. One of the reasons dealers have always wanted customers in the stores to humanize the experience, but how do you go about accomplishing that now that more of the shopping and buying experience is taking place online?
Well, you can still deliver a humanized experience digitally. What's important to remember, as anybody attending this will I believe attest, a car is a very emotional purchase, and for many people, for most people, it's one of the largest purchases they make in their lifetime. It's also a purchase that they typically need some reassurance or some additional information from a person at some point along that journey. Now, we know from a number of different studies, the majority of that process they want to be able to perform themselves online. But the moment that they're ready to say, okay, I've got enough information, now I want to talk to somebody, now I certainly want to see the car, we need to have our best foot forward to accept that customer and treat them with the care and value that we would if they walked through our front door. We have a tendency to do things as an industry like outsource that first point of contact, as Matt alluded, with our web chats or our social messaging. Put somebody in the position to win there and have someone who's truly going to help that customer in the moment versus just collect their information and send you into a lead bucket. That's an opportunity to make an impression on a customer, show the human side immediately through a digital channel, and then let them choose when they want to take that relationship from the digital to the physical. We can absolutely deliver humanity through there. We just need to put people in the right position to receive that customer in the channel of engagement that they wish to do business with, much like Matt brought up.
Thank you, Chad. So what advice, this is for Matt and Ron, what advice would you give to dealers who are still trying to figure out how to offer their customers an experience that is more modernized and digital first? Matt, we'll start with you.
I would say work with your OEMs. And first, embrace digital. It's not going away, right? 20 years ago, plus years ago, the internet was we were reluctant to embrace the internet as retailers. Don't let digital retailing and reputation management be that same reluctance now. So embracing digital and doing business the way that the customer wants, and working with your OEM partners. They've probably got relationships with digital partners that they're doing back-end integrations with to provide both the customer and you more information. Maybe that's tie-ins to incentives. Maybe that's tie-ins to the third-party providers for other services, also accessories, captive finance. I mean, there's so many ways to make it easier for you to do business with the customer and easier for your customer to do business with you that the OEMs are also interested in. But embracing that, and as Chad said, when a customer does go from online to in-store, make sure you pick them up from where they left off online, right? Don't allow that to start over where if the customer comes in and having gone 3/4 of the way through the purchase process with you, they're down to a VIN, they've got down to a payment, just for them to come in and the sales consultant or someone at the dealership try to start them from scratch. Nothing can be more frustrating for a customer. So just knowing the information that you have at your fingertips and embracing that as well.
Absolutely. Ron, what about you?
I think this industry is actually really blessed to have some pretty incredible companies that offer like amazing technology solutions. And there's this kind of joke that I've heard at dealerships that they always kind of underutilize all of the solutions that they actually have available at their fingertips, right? So I think leaning in with your partners of all of the things that you're paying for on a monthly basis, whether it be like the messaging tool or the chat and text tool that we've talked about, whether it be your digital retailing solution, your reputation provider, all of those kind of things, leaning in and partnering with them deeper to make sure that you're truly maximizing all of these solutions that are actually available to you. I think that's really, really key. Because you're probably leaving some things on the table, and that's going to help you get better, and that's going to help you meet the customer where they are. And I think that's another key point, is thinking about like the customer journey, the different digital touch points that they go through throughout the buying process and how they go about making their decision. You have to meet them every step along the way and be willing to be flexible to answer questions as they come up, to provide them guidance and really help them through the process, whether that be sitting in front of a computer screen, whether that be on a phone call, or whether that be them sitting inside of your showroom. That flexibility is really important. And then the final thing I'll say is just really embracing training. Training should not be something that you do at the dealership only when there's like a new model that comes out, or when you buy some new piece of software from some provider. It needs to be something that is just ingrained in the way that you operate on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. You have to constantly be finding ways to challenge your team and help them get better every single day.
Thank you, Ron. So Ron and Matt just kind of previewed our next session. It's like they knew this was coming, I guess. But the phrase "be curious, not judgmental" has been something that the viewers of the show have really latched onto. In a brief background, Ted Lasso was challenged to a high-stakes game of darts, and during the game, he states, "Be curious, not judgmental," to explain why curiosity is more effective than closed-minded judgment. Had his opponent simply asked if he played a lot of darts, he would have learned that Ted was terrific in darts, and Ted then makes his point with a game-winning bullseye. So let's talk about curiosity. Curiosity leads to creativity, problem solving, and really the drive to continue learning. There are a ton of tools available at the OEMs and dealerships' disposal these days. And I've been on the tech provider side of the industry for some time now, and Ron also just said this, but over the years, there's been a recurring theme that dealerships are only using a small percentage of the available technology. So how do dealers get better with all of this technology? How do you get better to innovate and compete and hit that bullseye? Chad, we are going to start with you.
Sure. So Matt really hit on it. Ron, both of them did, as a matter of fact. There's so many different tools and applications and software products available to the industry, and a lot of them claim to integrate well with one another, but oftentimes there's breakdowns in just what data passes from one system to the next. Meanwhile, with all of that available to your salespeople, they have tendencies to kind of find their own way through it. So overarching theme here, process is everything. A defined and prescribed process of knowing where your customer is going to flow from one channel to the next. When they enter your digital retailing platform, where do they go from there? When they're in your CRM, are they making their way to the next point of interaction where a salesperson can pick up their journey, or your marketing tools can pick up their journey? Where those breakdowns occur is where the customer journey just falls apart. And example I have about a month and a half or so ago, I went and shopped a local competing dealership. I mystery shopped them just to see how their digital retailing experience went. And so I went basically end to end through their digital retailing platform, to the point that I was uploading insurance documents, driver's license through the portal, set an appointment to go in and view the car, got there, and no one really seemed to know I was coming. Eventually, the person who they said I had an appointment with didn't show up, so they paired me with a different salesperson. That salesperson wanted me to start straight from the beginning. So what are you looking for? What do you want to pay? I said, well, I've filled all of this information out. Fast forwarding through the experience, he was barely able to access all of the information that I had put in. I had to repeat myself constantly. And for the icing on the cake, he tacked an additional $1,000 markup over MSRP on the vehicle. When I challenged him on it, his response was, well, You just saw that on our website and you can't really trust it. I have all the numbers right here. So if your salespeople don't know the technology or don't know how to use the technology that's facing your customers, or where to pick them up, where they left off, the whole thing falls apart. Just launching a digital retailing platform on your site and calling it a day is not going to get you where you need to be. There has to be solidly defined process on the backside of that to enable the journey to flow together as we intend it to.
Thank you, Chad. So Matt, I'm going to pass this to you, but if you could also elaborate on how you're using the reputation platform and products to aid in that effort, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have information at our fingertips that we've never had before, right? So I read a stat the other day that 97% of customers read online reviews to decide where they're going to shop. The front door of everybody's business is no longer physical. It's online. And whether you think customers are doing it or not, if they do a Google search looking for a product, the 5-star rating is right there front and center. So you have to understand it and you have to manage it. And the reputation, not a shameless plug for you guys, but the reputation.com platform has given us much greater visibility to all the things that go into what's important to a customer for online reputation. It isn't as simple as a 5-star rating. A company could be 5 stars, have one review from 3 years ago. If I'm comparing that against a company that has 150 reviews and there are 4.8 and the last one was a week ago, I'm trusting the latter, right? So you have to take into consideration all of those factors. And on top of that, customers are also looking at what are you doing? What is that individual company or store doing in terms of responding to those reviews? If a negative review does come through, that's okay, because that's an opportunity for that company or that store to respond and resolve. And customers are very interested in understanding if something does go wrong, how is this company going to handle that? And if you do it well, that gives them a degree of confidence that that's a company that I'm willing to do business with.
Thank you. So we are at maybe about 5 minutes, just under left for the panel section of this webinar. From there, we'll open it up to Q&A. So anyone in the audience, if you've got any thoughts, start adding it into the Q&A section. And in the meantime, we are going to lead into our last segment here. A final theme in the show is beating the odds and believing in belief. This sign, as you see, is taped in their locker room. And it can be hard for one word to really capture so many things, but believe has stuck. And the belief in yourself, the people around you, the process, and really believing that you will prevail. So looking at the industry's current state, we're combating economic factors, supply chain factors, disruptors, evolving marketing and sales technology, so on. And people talk about these factors as being threats to the industry and the dealer body. But the better way to look at them is opportunities. With everything that we've discussed, describe what the industry looks like in 10 years. Matt, we'll kick it back to you.
That's a tough one. I don't think any of us really truly know. It's going to continue to evolve, and it's going to be evolving based on customer demand and customer preference, right? What's not going away and what's always going to be in short supply is time. So shortening the amount of time it takes for a customer to go through a sales process, making it easier for them to service their vehicle, there's going to be continued innovation in that space. You're going to see more and more brands doing service valet. You're going to see more and more brands doing remote deliveries for cars. And I think you're probably going to see smaller brick and mortar solutions and more convenient locations for customers to do business with brands and retailers.
Thank you. Chad, what about you? What does the industry look like in 10 years?
Yeah, I have a similar outlook to Matt. It's going to be highly focused on convenience and time savings, not the traditional massive dealership footprints that are out there with inventory flowing into offsite lots, but a more tailored, specific buying experience, a more specific ordering experience where there won't be quite as much inventory on hand, which can enable dealers to be in more boutique type settings where it's more comforting, warm, experiential than I think what is traditionally existed with these giant buildings. Similarly, with the service experience, the easiest way to have your car serviced is to never have to go there at all. So do there, become more remote offsite locations where someone's going to do the pickup and delivery and bring the car back to you. I also believe that technology is going to continue to improve, to the buyers and to the dealers' benefit. Things like DMVs that have been very slow to adapt to certain paperless processes, or lenders, they're going to be forced to evolve. And as those solutions become available, those in the automotive software space are going to capitalize on that opportunity, and it only gets better for the buyer. I think that lends to a more consistent experience across different dealers, where it's going to be competing to stay ahead on balancing that human factor with really slick, really simple technology that the customer finds easy to use, but being right there to help them with the emotional side of that purchase the moment that they need it.
Thank you. Ron, take us home. What does the industry look like in 10 years?
I think, with everything we've talked about today, the roles and responsibilities of the staff at a dealership is going to have to change and going to have to evolve. If you look at the way that a dealership is typically structured today with their employees, it actually looks pretty much identical to the way that it was about 10 years ago. So I think there's definitely some change that needs to happen there. And I think that's going to happen over the next couple of years. Service is certainly going to be a huge opportunity as vehicles from each manufacturer become more nuanced and more specific and more difficult to maintain. It's going to present a huge opportunity for dealers to really lean in, and I think continue to maximize their their throughput and their profitability from the service department. Final thing I'll say, we're anticipating at Cars that the publicly traded dealer groups are going to double the amount of stores that they have as part of their portfolios over the next 5 years. What that looks like in the next 10, I think is you could probably extrapolate it out from there. But I think what that means then is that these really large dealer groups, like the Holmans, the Lithias, the AutoNations, they're going to continue to have a larger and larger footprint. And it's going to be really important for them to be able to define, what does the customer experience look like for their entire group and all of their stores, not just for one specific brand. So I think what we're going to see is the OEMs and these large dealer groups really start to work closer together and help continue to drive the industry forward. And it's not necessarily going to be what does one brand want versus the other? I think we're going to see things become much more flexible. And for these dealer groups, I think it's going to be much easier for them to define what are the software solutions and the processes that they're putting in place to help drive the industry and their business into the future.
Thank you. So that officially concludes our panel questions. Now is the time. Get your Q&A questions in. We've already got a couple. First one, big area of customer frustration is time waiting to get into F&I. Any feedback on best practices to create a better customer experience, starting with the salesperson to sales manager to F&I manager transition for the customer? Which of you three wants that one? You want that one?
I'll start off, and I'm sure the other gentlemen have some things, but I think ultimately, we need to actually remove the amount of turnover or TOs that it takes to get somebody through the buying process. If you think about it, if you just simply ask a question to a store online, right? Well, you might go to a BDC representative who just kind of, does a needs analysis and maybe tries to answer the question the best they can. If they can't, or if they qualify you, then it goes to a sales representative. That sales representative helps, find you the right car and, make sure that that's a good match, helps punch some numbers, those kind of things. If there's any conflict or any additional negotiating, well, then they need to turn it over to a manager. Now the manager might step in and handle that. Once we get a deal in place, it kind of goes back to the salesperson. Salesperson helps make sure that everything's finalized. Then it gets kicked over to F&I, right? The process kind of goes on and on and on. We have to find a way to streamline that. I talked a little bit about some of the, rethinking of roles and responsibilities at a dealership. I think ultimately we maybe have too many layers, and it starts to become a little bit difficult for us to implement the change that we want to help us continue to innovate.
Thank you, Ron.
I agree. I think we have a tendency to overcomplicate things and add layers in that aren't necessarily adding value, where if you can have more of a fixed pricing strategy or know exactly what your flexibility level is, the customer feels better when the salesperson doesn't have to get up away from the table and go to some mysterious person who somehow comes back with a number that still isn't what you asked for. That's just such a pain point that exists for so many dealerships today. Now, where it comes to finance, there are some fairly specific skills and knowledge that needs to exist there, whether it's compliance. And, I would love for it ultimately to be a one-person flow, but it's very difficult to find the right person who can take somebody from end to end. I do think technology, as we look down the line, is going to get us a whole lot closer to being able to get there. But in the meantime, before that technology is there, having a really solid process in place where there's clear expectations that are set for that customer as to when and why and what's going to transpire if there does need to be a handoff, make it really clear to the customer and give them some options too. If it's a day where you're sure that the finance office is backed up, feel comfortable enough that that customer can come and take a scheduled delivery after the fact, and they're not going to leave your dealership for good and never see them again. There's this held belief that the moment the customer exits the door without the keys in their hand, they're gone. And that's not necessarily the case. They may be more than willing to come back that next day or on Monday afternoon to finalize the transaction. But as dealers, we tend to be very nervous about letting that customer go. That sort of mindset's really got to shift.
Yeah, I would argue that in many states, the technology is there to be able to do the sales consultant be able to take them through the whole deal. Now you have to have a higher level of sales consultant to do that. But if you aren't able to do that, why not fill that time with something that the customer needs to do anyway and make that a value add time? So one of the things we do at Infinity is we take a customer through a VIN specific tailored delivery process and review the features that are important to the customer. So fill that time with the customer, letting them select what features are you going to want me to review with you during delivery, so that I'm not going to keep you here for an hour and a half, 2 hours reviewing things that you don't really care about. I'll focus on those things that, one, I know you really need to know because they're difficult to understand. And then on top of that, what else is it that you need to understand? And then also doing things like enrolling them in like the brand app, setting them up for their first service appointment, introducing them to service. There's a lot of things that happen after the customer comes out of F&I that could happen while they're waiting for F&I. And then you're not waiting for F&I, you're just facilitating the transaction.
Thank you. Next question. How do you navigate all of the different platforms where people leave feedback? Which do you find more valuable?
I guess I can start with that one. I mean, the reputation tool certainly aggregates that for us and allows us to see it all in one place, which is excellent. We tend to, we try to be what we are involved in all of the platforms, but we, from a consumer standpoint, Google has such a level of independence and lack of bias, I guess you could say, that, and there's a lot of consumer trust in there that, it's just that's probably the most important platform that we're looking at, as well as platforms where we may have paid advertising that's going on that site where we're intentionally driving traffic. It's important to have your best foot forward there and be extremely responsive and show the public who's browsing through your reviews that you really are there in the event something does go south, as much as you are appreciative of all of the positive comments when a customer takes the time to leave it. So Google, and then sort of prioritizing our advertisers based on value.
Yeah, for us, we use a couple of different platforms. So we use Reputation for that unstructured customer-driven feedback where we can find out what's really on their mind, and leverage that for not only the 5-star rating, but sentiment analysis and learn things about our process or about the retailer or about individuals that are unprompted that we wouldn't even know to ask. At the same time, we've got our structured diagnostic survey tools where we ask specific questions for customers after a sales or service transaction to make sure that the process that we feel that is important for an Infinity consumer, it's happening at retail. So that's kind of how we use the two different types of feedback.
Another question. How do you manage informal customer feedback like on social media?
I can share some advice there. I assume the question's probably in relation to, maybe like Facebook ads or Facebook posts or, other social media, content that you might be sharing where, there's oftentimes comments being made that are feedback related or maybe review related, but aren't necessarily as structured as like, here's how many stars and here's like the comments as to why that star rating, was given. I think social listening is a really important component of any reputation strategy. I understand the more and more social platforms that come out, it gets to be challenging to actually manage communication and be proactive on every single one of them. If I'm not mistaken, I think the reputation platform has a solution for that. But I also think, depending on the resources you have available to you, you could certainly have, sort of leaders of certain platforms within your organization who kind of own a specific channel. Those need to be people that can potentially sort of have the appropriate voice of the organization. But you also don't want to necessarily leave everything to the public view if there are things you need to troubleshoot or there's things that you need to solve for the customer, right? Like you don't want to try to do that all within a comment section of like a Facebook post. You want to acknowledge that, and you want to try to take that conversation maybe to a more private discussion. So I think it's just a matter of like making sure you're listening, making sure that you have a plan in place of how you can make sure nothing gets missed. Because one of the worst things you can do is have customers leaving feedback or saying things and you're completely ignoring it, right? Like you need to make sure that you're taking control of the narrative, so that way you're controlling your brand image across any platform.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You have to respond to those reviews as well. So it's not okay to ignore the positive reviews and just respond to the negative reviews. You wouldn't have a customer come into your sales manager and say what a great job their sales consultant did. That sales manager wouldn't turn around and walk the other way. Acknowledging that positive feedback is expected. 70% of customers expect a response, both negative or positive, when they leave a review. So don't ignore it.
And I agree. And speed is important, but when I'm saying speed, it's addressing that customer issue as quickly as possible, because your ideal response to a negative review is, I'm glad we were able to come to a great understanding. I'm glad we were able to take care of this for you. We look forward to doing business with you for years to come. Something that to the next observer, knowing that this is customer service on stage, right? It's almost a performance when you read some of these things. But we want to make sure that it's a good show, and the customer comes away the customer, you've resolved their issue, which is at the heart of the problem. But then two, it's evident and clear to other people considering doing business with you that you do have the customer's back, and that you will quickly respond, react, and resolve, and show that in a public fashion. And to Ron's point, this isn't where you air the dirty laundry and tell them exactly what you gave them, but to be able to speak to a high level of a positive outcome, or at minimum, we're trying to reach you to work through this. They've got to see that you've taken action to it, not just thanks, we'll try to get better next time.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Thank you, especially to our panelists. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can reach out to us anytime. If you'd like to get your hands on the latest auto report, we can get that, or I can get that over to you as well. But we're here to help. So everyone, again, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.